Welcome back. I am so glad you made it here today. I hope everything went well with you yesterday, that you took action and you're taking those steps forward toward your 90-day goal. So super exciting. But today we've got a big question to answer, and that is, what have you and what can you learn from failure? Did you fail yesterday at doing anything? And if you did, what did you learn from it? You see, success is something that we all desire. We all want to achieve something. We all want to be successful at something. The problem is that if we're successful at everything that we do, that means we're only doing stuff we already know how to do. We're not challenging ourselves. We're not learning anything. And learning, challenging ourselves, and failing at something is where growth happens. That's where you become bigger and better than you are right now, because you're learning, you're seeing what works and what doesn't work. Because if you already know everything that works, then you're already successful. And success on a continued basis with no spot to learn or to fail or to grow just becomes boring. It's like playing a video game but having the cheat code put in so you can't die. You never run out of ammunition. You never run out of resources or anything. And then it just becomes like a sandbox mode. You're just running around doing random things, but there's no challenge. There's no excitement or adventure. We are reframing failure as a growth opportunity. It's something that we look forward to. It's something that we want to have happen. Because the more times we fail, the more we learn and the more we grow from it. One of the things society has done around failure is it's really demonized it and made failure a bad thing. You got a bad grade on a test. You failed it. You missed something at work. You failed that opportunity. You've got the wrong answer when somebody asks you a question. You're a failure. It's made to have been a painful experience and something that people want to start avoiding rather than engaging and leaning into. Because of that, a lot of people don't try anything new. They stick with exactly what they know, which only produces the same kind of results that they have. Likewise, if you're at a job site, if you're a student, no matter what it is you're doing, you always look to somebody else for the answer. It's a common thing when people don't know an answer to say, hey, I need to ask somebody else what the right answer is. And that's a great strategy to have if you don't know the answer. But sometimes it becomes a crutch where people aren't going to push themselves outside of their comfort zone. They just want to run to find what the right answer is, or just shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know and I can't. But that's the whole point of failure, is we don't want to look at it as something that's bad, as something that is that points out a flaw in us. We want to look at failure as an opportunity to learn, as an opportunity to get better. Because when we change the criteria and we change our definition of what failure is, we decide to start moving forward more powerfully. We decide to start making decisions to see what the outcome could possibly be. Because that's when we start making discoveries. That's when we start finding out things that we didn't know, or understanding how a system works. And once you understand how a system works, now you can start making changes and you can start growing through it. When you were in school, did you ever have the experience when a teacher handed back a test and every single person rushed to go ask each other what grade they got, looking to see where they fit in the spectrum of things? If you got a high grade on it and you looked at all the people that had a low grade, you felt validated. You felt like you were the smartest person. If you were the kid with the lowest grade, you may have been covering that up and not wanting anyone to know that you had a low grade for fear that they would think that you were stupid. But yet, the person that was failing then was made to feel like they were wrong, that they were a bad person, that they just didn't know enough and should be teased and punished for it. So what does that end up teaching the student? It ends up teaching them that wrong answers are bad. It teaches them to not try to grow outside of where they currently are. They'll answer questions that they know the answer to, and then they'll shy away from anything that they don't know the answer to because they've been made to feel that they were wrong. They've been made to feel that any sort of wrong answer leads to immense emotional pain. And that's when they're going to start becoming, having a limited mindset and becoming a prisoner within their own mind because they say, I don't want to be wrong and be made fun of. I don't want to be wrong and be laughed at. I don't want to take a big risk and it turns out that I had no idea what I was doing because it lowers what people see me as. It lowers my status in the world. If people think that I'm a dumbass because I keep making mistakes, now all of a sudden, what does that mean about me? And they don't just take it as a, I failed and I can learn. They take it as an identity of, I'm a failure. Do you see the difference there? It's small, but it's definite. The difference between failing at something and being a failure is night and day. One is you failed and you learned something. The other is saying you're a failure and you're always going to be a failure. So it's important for you to make that distinction in your own life. So you want to try new things. You're excited about exploring and being an adventurer. You're excited about failing at different things and finding out what works and what doesn't work. So what happens when you fail at something? What should we do? We've tried something and it didn't work. What next? Well, the first thing to do is to start looking at what is it that you got right? What parts can you look back on and just confirm for yourself that you got right? So the way teachers work is they normally on a test will look and they're going to mark off all of the questions that you got wrong. Usually it's a big red X, right? And so when you look at that, what do all those red X's make you feel like? This is where I'm wrong. I'm wrong about all of these things. It doesn't make you feel good. However, what would it change if they started just circling with a green marker all of the things that you got right? So first off, we can look at what we got right. And then we can go back and figure out the right answers to the questions that we didn't have a right answer to. So first off, it puts us in a much better state. It makes us look toward learning and saying, oh, okay, these questions aren't the right answer, so let me go find what the right answer is. The second part of this is saying, let's look at all those answers that aren't the right answer and figure out why they're wrong. Why did we have this wrong? Because if you can understand the why behind it, now you can understand the system itself. Because when you understand the concept of what's going on, then you understand how to start solving those problems in the future. If you only memorize answers to something, then you don't understand why it works. And this is why whenever anyone asks questions and they're just looking for the answer to the question rather than looking to understand why the answer is the way it is, that's where you start running into problems. Because you could be great at memorizing information. The problem is anytime you're asked to explain it or to actually understand what it is, you don't understand it. You just know this is the answer. And if those answers ever change, then you're not going to know why they changed. So we want to look at what it is that we got right, and then look at why were we wrong at something. Because if we know why we're wrong, we can change it and we can get better at it. So one of my biggest failures, this was a failure that it took me a while to finally get the lesson from it, but I finally did, and it was great. But beforehand, I was at a conference speaking, so I was giving a whole presentation, and as I was giving this presentation, I thought I was doing a good job. I felt confident. I was out there speaking. I was pointing at people in the audience. I was asking questions. I was getting a response. I thought I was doing fantastic. And then at the end of my talk, I sold a product, or I should say I attempted to sell a product. So I made the best pitch that I possibly could. And guess how many people bought? If you said 0, you're 100% right. So nobody bought from this. Nobody bought from my talk that I thought went so incredibly well. Now, the first thing that I thought was it was the audience. The audience wasn't right. And that particular thing was, I said, it's something else outside of me. It couldn't be me. That was the first mistake. And it was a massive mistake because I didn't take ownership for my ability. I didn't take ownership for what I said, thinking that it could have possibly been me. So I went for a good 6 to 8 months just saying it wasn't me. It was somebody else. It was all of them. They didn't understand it. They didn't get it. The bigger question would have been, what can I change? Why was I wrong? Why did this not work out the way I wanted it to? And what could I change to make it correct? Now, I finally got that lesson later on, but the biggest mistake I made, the biggest failure I had, was thinking that it wasn't me, that it was somebody else's fault. So when failure happens, we need to look at it and understand, what is it that we can do to make a change? What is it that we can learn so we're better the next time, rather than thinking it's something outside of my control? So once I started taking ownership of that, that was the lesson I could learn from failure. That was the big lesson that I had, was realizing that this all comes down to me. If somebody doesn't understand my communication, that's my fault. If somebody doesn't buy my product at the end, that's my fault for not communicating it in a way that they can understand. See, when I take responsibility for the things that I fail at, that gives me the opportunity to learn and to move forward and to grow from it. If I don't accept responsibility for the failures that I have, then that means I put it outside myself onto something else. And that something else won't change things for me. Now, this isn't the only failure, but there have been tons of failures. And failures have actually produced some really interesting results. Some of the greatest products that we have today have been found purely by accident. Toward the end of WW2, there was a guy named Percy Spencer, and he was an engineer, and he was studying and doing experiments to find a new energy source for radar. And yet, while that didn't work out the way it would, or that the way he wanted it to, he started realizing that the chocolate bar that he had tucked in his pocket had melted. And he thought, wow, this is really odd. This energy source seemed to have melted this chocolate bar that I find here in my pocket. And so then he went on to go test it some more by testing it with popcorn and using this to make popcorn and cook it with this energy source that he had. Guess what that turned into? If you use a microwave, you could thank Percy Spencer for that. Crazy. He was looking for one thing to create an energy source for radar, and yet he ended up creating something completely different. It was a failure, but it was a failure that produced an even better result than anybody probably could have thought. And now it's something that everyone uses every single day. So notice that the failures that you have might not be failures at all. It makes you excited to go out there and try something and fail at it, right? Because while you might fail at doing one thing, that might be you also discovering something else. Now, this wasn't limited just to microwaves. This was also limited to things like cornflakes and gunpowder, penicillin, a strikeable match, and even Viagra. That's right. That drug was created by Pfizer as a way to help people with angina. So that's a heart condition. And they started realizing, so this was to help blood flow with the heart, but they realized in their tests that it was having an additional effect on all of the men. Therefore, they created a different PR campaign, and now you have Viagra, a complete failure that became a success. So I say this to you today so you can understand and see that failure is a phenomenal thing. It's a way for us to learn. It's a way for us to get better. It's a way for us to discover new things we would have never discovered before. And it all comes from what we can learn from the failures that we have. I want you to realize that failure is an extremely important tool that you have at your disposal. It is not a bad thing at all. It is a great and powerful thing that you have. Because even if you fail on a grand scale, even if it costs you money or time or energy or emotional equity, it's still worth it when you can see what you've learned and how you've grown from it. The only true failure is when you don't learn a lesson from it and you keep doing the same thing again and again and again. So look to where you're failing and see what you can learn from it. Push yourself out of your comfort zone to try new things, things that scare you. Don't be afraid of failure. Run to embrace it. And throughout the rest of our 90 days together, I want you to look for new places that you can stretch yourself. You can challenge yourself. You can be excited to fail because the more failures that you get, the more chances of success that you have. So get out there. Make sure that you're taking action. Stretch yourself. Be okay to fail. And I will see you tomorrow. And until then, get out there, go ahead and fail, and take action now.